Hi everybody. I got the power. I got the power. I love the power. I love the power. La 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 la.
Hello again, Nashville Software School students. This video is going to be a more in-depth introduction into the Visual Studio Code editor environment. I'm going to open up a sample application that I usually walk students through. I'm going to show you how to use the debugger to debug some problems that arise in the code. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how to create instances of classes. I'm going to show you namespacing, all kinds of cool introductory things to get you started. First off, I'm going to start you off with some keyboard shortcuts. So right here, you see my Visual Studio Code editor, and no code is loaded, and you also see the sidebar. So to toggle the sidebar in Visual Studio Code on a Mac, it is Command B. Now I'm guessing on Windows it's probably Control B. Now you'll see my sidebar is. Hit that again, Command B. There you go. Toggles that on and off. The next keyboard shortcut is Shift Command D. That brings up the debug panel. Walking you through more about this later. So to get back to basically what's called the Explorer view, is Shift Command E. Our file system. These are the only two panels we're going to be working with today. So I just wanted to show you the keyboard shortcut to show the panel and then toggle between debug and. Let's load up this program that I have. It's a command line application. And again, it always starts in this program.cs. So I'm going to toggle my panel again so that we can see the most of code. B. All right. So we have our using statements at the top. So I am going to be using some of the methods that are available on the system namespace. The next three using statements are my own namespaces that I defined right here in my own program. So in this file, you will see I have a custom namespace called Bangazon. Okay? That's the name of my application, just Bangazon. But you'll see that I'm using three different namespaces. I'm going to open up my panel again. I'm going to show you where those are defined. Over here, you'll see I have a couple subdirectories. One is customers, one is orders, one is payments. Let me open up the customer.cs source code file. In here, I'm simply using the system namespace from the .NET framework. And right here, I define a new namespace, bangazon.customers. And inside that namespace, I will put all of the code that relates to dealing with customers in my system. Right now, all I have is this simple customer class with a first name and a last name, and then a method. So if I want to use this public class of customer somewhere else in my code, here's how I do that. I include it with that include the namespace of bangazon.customers. So now in this file, I can use the class of customer. And you'll see I have orders and payments. And just to show you, open up order CS. That's where I define bang orders. In this payment subdirectory, you'll see I have three different classes. Payment.cs, PayPal.cs, and card.cs. In each one of these, I define that they are living within, they are encapsulated inside the namespace of payments. Payment.cs, credit card.cs, also in that namespace, and PayPal.cs, also in that namespace. This goes back to what I was telling you before, that common code, things that are relating to certain types of things in your system, certain functionality that you want in your system, you can include that all in a namespace. And then elsewhere in your code, even though these classes, the PayPal class, the payment class, credit card class, are separated in three different physical files, they are now all included in the same namespace. That back here in program.cs, including using bangazon.payments, all three of those classes are now available to me. So I'm going to close my Explorer panel again, see the maximum amount of code. Let's look at my command line application. So I've included the system library from .NET, and then I'm also using my own three different namespaces. Go look at my public static void main, the entry point of my application. Now the first thing I do in here is I create a new instance of the customer class. Let's take a look at that real quick. Here it is. So here is my blueprint for objects that are going to be of type customer. What we are doing is defining our own custom types in the system. As with most languages, they come with default types: integer, string, Boolean, certain types of collections. Well, we can extend what comes in the native language with our own custom types. And that's what customer is. So on this custom customer type, that 5 times fast, I've defined 2 properties: first name and last name. Let's look at how I declare those. The class itself is public, meaning anybody can create a new object of type customer. The public string, okay, I'm saying the accessibility is public. I've declared that they will hold a string, meaning they can't hold anything else besides a string. And of course, the variable name themselves. Now, after that, you'll see the curly braces with just a short get and set. Basically setting up a default getter and setter for this. You'll see what I mean in a second. After I've defined these properties, I now define a method on this object. It's not going to return anything. Remember, the void keyword means the method itself will not have a return value at all. It is also publicly accessible. And the name of this method is greet. It does not accept any parameters at all. All it does is use the system. That's why I have using system at the top of this file. The console method, the console.writeLine method, is contained within the system library that comes with .NET Framework. I'm just performing a task, which is why this method doesn't return anything. I'm just writing out, welcome, this.firstname, this.lastname. A relatively new introduction to the C# language is that $sign at the beginning, which should look somewhat familiar with the string interpolation that you used in JavaScript. But instead of having to put the $sign in front of every single interpolation, which would be this.firstname and this last name, you just put the $sign at the beginning of the string in C#. And then you can use the curly braces to define what variables are going to be injected into the string at that point. Back to the main program. So I just hit my Control Tab key sequence there. I'll do it again. So just by tapping Control Tab, so toggle back and forth between the last 2 files that you had open in the editor. If I hold down the Control key and keep hitting Tab, it pops up this little window, and you can toggle between all the different files that you have open at this point. So if I wanted to go to credit card, which was the 3rd last one that I opened, which is not just toggling back and forth, I can just hold down the Control key and then select credit card. So, handy keyboard shortcut. I've created my very first customer. That's with a new keyword, much like you learned in JavaScript. So I'm creating a new instance of the customer class. The customer class itself does not take any arguments, so I just have empty parentheses there. The name, the variable that's going to hold the instance, is first customer. But you'll notice I put the type at the beginning of that variable name. That's what you need to do in C#. Now, C#, you probably have heard that it's a statically typed language. Well, that's not so much true anymore. Back in the day, around 2001, when the language first came out, yes, it was completely statically typed, meaning every variable had to be declared as what type it is. That is no longer true anymore. But just to learn the language in the beginning, you are going to be declaring the type of the variable when you create it. So in English, this line 13 here, what I'm saying is I'm declaring a variable. It's going to hold a customer, and that's what the word customer means here. Okay, that is the type of thing that is going to be the value of this variable. Then I'm immediately giving it a value of a new instance of customer. After I declare the first customer, there's those properties, and then I invoke that greet method. So I'm just going to stop here, and I'm going to run this program. So another keyboard shortcut in Visual Studio Code. If you hit Control tilde, remember tilde is the key to the left of the 1 key on the keyboard. Control tilde, that brings up the integrated terminal. Hear that real quick. Okay, it's just like opening up a terminal session with command space and typing in terminal. It's the exact same terminal session. I'm going to do a .NET run here and execute this code. And let's see what happens. Oh, there's an error. Okay. So on a Mac, I can't remember what this looks like on a Windows machine, but when you try to run a program and it fails, it raises an exception, you're going to get this window every time. And you'll see it says system.index out of range exception. Index was outside the array at bangison.program.main. So it's basically telling me where this error got raised. It got raised inside this method and was trying to invoke that. So let's go back and look at the right hand side of these expressions where I'm trying to assign the first name and last name of my first. I'm looking at args at index of 0. Go back up and look at the method definition. Args is containing an array of strings. That's what comes in from the command line in a C# application. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to type .NET run again. But I'm going to specify some command line arguments. Well, what do I need? Let's look at line 14 here again. Args at index 0, so the very first argument. Should look fairly familiar from JavaScript. I want to split the very first string. Okay, it's an array of strings, so I know it's going to be a string. I want to split it. This is how it's a little bit more verbose. So you're going to discover that as you go through this course. There's simply a lot more to type in a C# program than in JavaScript. Because of the typing system, you do have to be much more explicit about exactly what needs to happen and the types of things that you want to create. So all I'm doing here is creating an array of characters that I want to use to split the string with. Okay? And then say, use the first one. After I split it, look at the first word. So this is a long-handed way of saying, I'll show you, I'm going to pass in a string of my name, Steve Brownlee. So args at index 0 is this string. That's why it's surrounded in quotes. Putting quotes around Steve Brownlee makes that one argument. Okay, so that's at index 0. Then I'm going to split the string on a space. So that gives me an array of Steve at index 0 and Brownlee at index 1. I want to take index 0, which is Steve. I'm going to assign it to first name. Okay, so my customer first name is going to be Steve. At index 1 is Brownlee. Last name of Brownlee. So that's how you can pass in command line argument. I'll run it again. I got an error again. It says object reference not set to an instance of an object inside that same method. I'm not clear where that happens because I'm creating first customer, I'm creating first order. Down here I'm defining some more things, finding a payment and a string. I really have no idea where this happens. So that means we got to go to debug mode. Back up here and I'm going to put a breakpoint. Down here I see, I got to the greet method. You remember that's, after you assign the first name and last name, it just provides welcome. So I know I got that far in my code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint right here on line 19 after the greet method. So Shift Command E to get to debug, launch my debugger. The debugger will pause on an exception. Even though I told it to break here, when it reaches an exception, it'll actually pause and tell you where that exception occurred. An exception occurred right here. This line of code, 14. Wonderful thing about Visual Studio Code is also the Intellisense. You can just hover your mouse over things and try to find the value of them. See, as I'm moving my mouse over here, and to actually determine what the value of these things are. So I'm going to put my mouse over first name. It's null. Why is it null? Okay, I'm looking at args. There we go. We start to see some problem. Args at index 0, there is nothing. Because when I launched it in debug mode, I wasn't able to specify those command line arguments. Well, Luckily, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to click the red box. Luckily, when you first started an application and you launch Visual Studio Code, it provides you with that prompt saying, hey, the tools needed to build and debug this program aren't installed. And you click yes to that, you can go ahead and install them. Where they live is under this .vs code directory that gets created. This launch.json, what you need to open. And here is the configuration for launching this thing in debug mode. So one of the things you can specify down here is the args. So launching in debug mode, you can say, oh, I want to pass in these arguments. So I'm going to pass in Steve Brownlee here. There we go. That's going to be the first argument every time. Back to debug mode, Shift Command D, launch it again. See what happens. Ooh, look at that. We got to welcome Steve Brownlee. Accepted that as a command line argument. All right, I am now paused in debug mode, where I put my breakpoint. So I'm creating a new instance of my order class. Cool. So I'm going to use the second one over here. Step over. I'm going to just step over this one line at a time to see where this exception is occurring. Couldn't quite figure out where it was just by looking. Okay, that worked. Didn't raise an exception. Keep going. Creating a new payment, setting it to null by default, setting up a main email address. Here's some comments I wrote. Depending on the value of the last argument, assign the payment variable to the correct class. Ooh, that's a hint right there. Depending on the value of the last argument. I only put in one argument. It looks like here we're looking at the value of yet another argument that I did not define. Switching between credit and PayPal. Okay. Since I didn't pass those in, I'm going to go down here to default. And then I set payment amount. There we go. There's our exception. Null reference exception. I'm going to put my mouse over the variable of payment. There it is. It is null. And I'm trying to look at the amount property of null. Null does not have an amount property, so that's why it's throwing this exception. I'm going to show you other neat things. Debug mode. Notice over here, these are the local variables that exist when the breakpoint hits or when an exception is raised. We'll show you all of the variables that exist within the scope of the code that you're currently looking at. You can look at properties of them. Here's my first order. Properties I set. Here's the args that got passed in. That's Steve Brownlee. You can inspect every single variable that exists within the scope of where the code is currently stopped. You want to, as you're going through the code, you want to have several variables, like quick hit look, the really important ones, because these are all of the variables that exist. And you just want to focus on a couple ones. So I want to focus on payment. I'm going to highlight payment. I double clicked on it. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to add to watch. And it puts it over here in this second panel. So if there's just a few things that you want to focus on as you're working through your code, trying to figure out a problem, say first order is another thing I want to watch. So instead of having to find it in that mess of local variables at the top, these are the ones I want to focus on. All right, so I think I found the problem. Payment is null at this point. And looking at the hint of my comment here, it looks like I need a second command line argument. Open up my launch JSON, and I'm going to add either the credit or the word PayPal, other argument. Let's do credit card. Save that. Relaunch. Start. Our first breakpoint. Play from here. Hit our second breakpoint. What is payment now? Look at that. Just hovering over it, I can see all the properties of it. I can even expand it right here. Click on these arrows and you can drill down. Here's the order that it's assigned to the payment, order number. And it's going to be the same information that exists over here. Okay? It's basically the same control. One is over here in the watch panel, and one just pops up when you hover over it. There's also, down here at the bottom, where all this debug information is coming out, there's my greet method. Here's some other output that I'd specified. Down here at the very bottom, you can put your mouse, and you'll see it blinking here at the bottom. And here, you can just type things. When you get to full Visual Studio, you're going to discover something called the immediate window. And it just allows you to start typing code and seeing how it would evaluate given the context of where you are in the code breakpoint. So I could just type in payment at this point. It'll show me what that variable is. Right now, it doesn't have an amount. I can actually just type it in right here. Payment.amount, say $1,000. And if I look at payment again, expand it, there it is. Now has a value of $1,000. So you can actually change variables, invoke methods, see how they operate when there's a breakpoint in this debug console window. So I'm going to come up here and click play again and actually let it calculate the correct amount, because right now it's 1,000, not what it should be. I step over that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to expand my payment in the watch window. There's the actual amount. Somehow it's 0. Why is that? Well, taking the count of products and multiplying it by 9.9. Are there any products? Count of 0. There are no products in here. So if there are no products, that's the length of that, which in C#, look at the count of a collection. Remember back in JavaScript, if you want to see the length of an array, you would do dot length. Well, in C# and in many of these types of collections, you're going to do a dot. I don't have any in there. Nothing in the products for my order. So obviously the payment is going to be 0. So I'm just going to click angle, let this run. There we go. There's my final output. You are using an American Express card with this account number. Paid $0. So here's a bunch of things that I output during my program. Come back up here. I'm going to get rid of my breakpoint. I'm going to close my panel. So again, at the top, using. I've eliminated everything that I'm not using. So the only thing left at the top are actual system libraries or custom namespaces that I've defined, where I write my logic for the main program, the entry port command line application. So instantiate a customer. I create a new instance, new object of type customer. I look at the command line arguments that I sent in. I specify the first and last name property. Then I console write line. I create a new order. Look at what an order is real quick. Here we have a new accessibility level we haven't seen yet. Private. Private means the only code that can access this variable, underscore products. Okay? Right now, it is a list of type string. Your instructors will walk you through more about what this means. A list is much like an array. Got more stuff on it than an array, but think about it as array for right now. An array of strings. List, angle brackets of strings. Okay, so an array of strings. And only strings. It can't hold anything else besides a string. And this variable is only available within this class, this public class of order. Then I create the public variable that people can use. And I name it without the underscore products. It is also going to be a list of strings, because look at what I do down here. There is only a getter. By not providing a setter, it means nobody else can set the value of this. Meaning this has complete control over how that products variable, that list of strings, can be set. Nobody else can do it. It can only get value. Another private variable called order number, just using this UID, which is a globally unique ID library that's provided for us from the .NET framework, then generate a new globally unique identifier. Basically, I'm just creating a random order number for my order. And then people can get it back out. So again, nobody can set the order number. Defining some methods to add a product. It uses the private variable product to it. Writing a method to list the products out. But the keyword here is for each, instead of just a for keyword like you did in JavaScript. With a for each, you are iterating over a collection. In this case, I'm iterating over that list of strings that I specified in that private variable. In this for loop, for every product type string, okay? So for anything that is in this list of strings, so I'm going to iterate over that list one at a time. Build up this variable, say you ordered that thing. You know, let's say I have diapers and lollipops and hairbrushes in here. Okay, I'm going to create a new line that says you ordered diapers, you ordered lollipops, you ordered hairbrush. And then I return that out. See here, I don't have void anymore. This method actually returns something, and I have to specify what type of thing it returns. I'm building up a string. I'm returning a string, so the return type has to be string. Change to something else, such as, say, a Boolean. We're going to start getting our red lines again. Here we've defined that this method will return a Boolean. Isla comes down here, looks at our code, sees return. It knows this is a string, and it cannot implicitly convert a string to a type of. Isla's way of saying, you got bad. Gotta change it. I won't even compile. There's no way this thing will run. String. So now that I've created an order, let's look at my comment here. Create an order and add products from argument list. That means I need more arguments than I'm passing in right now. Because right now I'm passing in the customer name and I'm passing in the payment type. But it looks like the products also need to be added in command line. And I know from reading this previous comment, depending on the value of the last argument, assign the payment variable class. So I know that the last argument I pass in should be the payment type. So all the arguments before that are going to be products. I'm going to go back to my launch.json. Products in. Add in the three I mentioned. Diapers, lollipops, see if this works. Need to get to debug panel again. Run it. There we go. It worked. There's my greeting message. It iterated over all of the items in my order. There we go. A list of strings. I grabbed those from the command line arguments, added them to this list, and it lists them out for each string in that list of strings. Up this output and show it. Diapers. Ordered lollipops. You ordered a hairbrush. There we go. We got some output. So I'm not going to go any further into this program. I just wanted to give you a overview of how to really use the debugger, the variables panel, the watch panel, this debug console where you can actually type in variables and see what they equate to. I give you a nice overview of how namespaces can be used to organize different classes that are actually in different physical files, but you can organize those together and import them as one cohesive library with a namespace. Showed you some private variables, public variables. I've used collections now. You know, that's what a list is. This system.collections.generic. That's the .NET namespace that a list lives in. I've showed you how to use command line arguments to pass in information to program when it runs. I've showed you how to specify command line arguments when it's run in debug mode using this launch.json file. So I'm going to show you a couple more keyboard shortcuts. Some of the most common ones help acclimate you to the Visual Studio Code environment. So some of them are the same as Sublime Text or Atom if you're used to those. Some of them are a little bit different. One of the most common ones, you guys really need to practice these, is Command P. Okay, this is very much like Atom and Sublime Text. Here you can start typing in a file name. It'll do a regular expression match to try to find it. So I want to open up the PayPal, so I'll type in pay, and you'll see it has a couple open, and I can just click PayPal right there. Command P, a very useful one. Now, for you Sublime Text users, I'm not sure how it was in Atom or any of the other ones, but to duplicate a line, Sublime Text, it was Shift Command D. Visual Studio Code is a Shift Alt down. That'll duplicate a line beneath the one you were on, or Shift Alt up. It'll take that line and create a new one above it. Same functionality, duplicating a line. To delete a line, Shift Command K. That deletes an entire line. Just like in Sublime and Atom, hitting Command and then the square brackets for indenting and unindenting. Selecting multiple words that you want to change is just like it was in Sublime Text. You put your cursor on a word such as public, hit Command D, Command D, Command D. Now we have multiple cursors. I wanted to change all these to private. I could just start typing in the word private. Okay, so that hasn't really changed. Command Z and undo. So those are some beginning and very useful and most used keyboard shortcuts that you want to get used to in Visual Studio Code. So I hope this was helpful. Visual Studio Code is actually a very nice product now that I've had the chance to use it for several months. It has become my favorite right behind Sublime Text. That is still my favorite. But I have to say there are some things that Visual Studio Code does that is better, such as the integrated terminal. I think it's one of the best features of it. The debug panel, very, very nicely done. Not that different from Visual Studio, the full integrated development environment. 90% of what you need, they've already integrated right here into just the text editor of Visual. So right now, it's still a wonderful product. I'm sure that in a couple years, as they keep adding features and getting customer feedback, it's just going to keep getting better and better. So hopefully you found this helpful. Enjoy using Visual Studio Code, and we will see you in class.